Welcome everybody. Just to hear, I'd love to kick things off and just find out where we all are dialing into the webinar from. What cities are we reaching you in today? We are currently in Surrey Hills in Sydney. Damin, what were you saying about the air quality just before?
Oh, I was saying that we have the worst air quality in the world today, worse than Calcutta, which is probably pretty difficult to achieve if there wasn't some fire burning very close.
Yeah, that's. I think it's actually quite a good day for us to be staying indoors, and so okay, cool. It's good to hear. We've got people from all over, from WA, Gladstone, and Queensland, from Darwin. Max is from. A couple of callers in from Sydney as well. Welcome. So, all right, guys, we will kick off with the presentation as well, just so that we know in terms of housekeeping as well. I think somebody's already found the open questions, but if you go to the bottom of where the presentation is, there is a section where you are able to ask a question. What we will try and do is get to those questions once Damin has completed on his presentation. If it is something that we're unable to answer on the webinar, we'll do our best to assist you following this as well. We've also got a poll that's running up, so you can feel free to, at any of those points, tell us what your business structure is, just get a good idea for who we've got on the call as well. We'll be kicking off from there. So
Industry.
It would be good, so no one can see the poll. Oh, that's a shame. Anybody else? Ivan says there's no poll in there. Let's just put something in and we'll just check that everybody can see this. One moment, everybody. Anything else?
Company. Trust.
No polls. Take a look now. You should be able to see there's just a question that we're asking through there, the business structure. So, okay, it's there. Fantastic. Good to see. Okay, looks like, wow, we've got a fair few companies on the call as well. Alrighty, we will kick everything off now. So just wanted to give, before we hand things over to Damin, who's going to be our lead presenter for today, wanted to just give all of us a little bit of an introduction to LawPath. Most of us are LawPath users, members, customers, and so, we should be hopefully a little bit familiar with what we do. So, we're an online legal service provider based here in Sydney. We've been running for about 4 years now, and really what we try to do is provide online legal services to small, medium businesses all around Australia. And the idea is to provide you with technology-powered legal services that are going to help you to save in the way of time and also money as well. So to date, we've done a great deal of work across a range of different business industries and sizes. We've had over 220,000 documents completed through our software, registered over 10,000 companies, visits for the year of over 2.2 million each year. We just cracked last month 100,000 users as well. We've had over 20,000 quotes come through on our lawyer marketplace as well. So I wanted to first introduce you to today's presenter, Damin. Damin's been with us at LawPath for a number of years now, primarily on the side of working with our marketplace, helping if any work comes through that you need around all areas of law, helping out in the way of providing assistance for any of the different areas that we've got there: business law, consumer law, litigation. I'll get Damin to give a better instruction into what we have as well. Just confirming, can everybody hear us? Sounds like there's a little bit of an issue with sound once again. Yes, it sounds like a few of us have. Those of us who can't, just if you go and refresh your webinar browser, you should be able to then hear us back on. So I might just hand over from Damin now and give you a little bit of an introduction to who you are, what's brought you here today, and what you'll be talking about.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. So I have been working with LawPath since they were in an incubator, and there was 2 people there. It was around 2014. So I'm one of the first movers into legal tech, and our firm has always believed in legal tech as being the future. And so it's about being able to reach to the small clients who can't necessarily afford the big top tiers, and it's getting access to everybody to be able to provide that legal service to everybody at a good rate and on a fixed fee basis. So today we're going to try to turn your mind to the end of the year. We are exactly 4 weeks away pretty much from the end of the year. And one of the biggest things that people need to turn their mind to is, well, what do we need to do before the end of the year? In our position, between LawPath and I, is we think that collecting your debts is one of the most important things, and cleaning up your books and records. So that's primarily what we're going to talk about today. And we'll start off at the very beginning about collecting your debts. So before we start, though, we really want everybody to ask questions. And as the questions come up, we will try to answer them throughout the presentation. If not, we'll answer them at the end as well. And Tom will assist me with telling me what questions are happening, and I will try to answer them on the spot. So we'd love for you to get involved. And as a general legalese, this is just general information, and it's not specific advice. All right, collecting your debts. So because we are only 4 weeks away, the biggest thing that we want to focus on is try to get your cash flow going, and if you're a business owner, we want you to get paid before Christmas. Cash flow is the biggest problem for small businesses. And I pulled up a couple of statistics saying that Australia is the worst in the world. We're the worst offender for late payment. And if you don't get on top of it, that debt will slowly creep up, and it will cause serious cash flow issues. And you'll see that on average, a small business has $13,000 worth of credit or debts owing to them. Now, what we want to do is create a strategy for you, or help you create a strategy to try to collect these debts before the end of the year. My experience is that I don't know exactly what industry you are in, but if you can tell me what industry you're in, I can start trying to tailor my webinar a little bit towards you, the listener. So one of the things is, as a law firm myself, I have big debts and I have small debts. Sometimes we have a little disbursement, like $40. And if we don't send an invoice for the $40 within maybe 30 to 60 days after the file's closed, it's almost embarrassing for us to send a $40 invoice in about 3 months from now. And eventually you will look at your debtors and you'll say, well, there's a couple of these little disbursements. We haven't followed them up for months. We might as well just write them off. And so rather than writing them off, it's about keeping your finger on the pulse and making sure you are basically going through every single matter that you have, and making sure even the smallest debts are chased. The reason is that if you wanted to file a claim in VCAT, QCAT, NCAT on your own, or in magistrate's court, for instance, the filing fee is about $67 to anywhere to maybe $600. So you're not going to be chasing any debts in the court process if your debt is less than $600. So you want to try to chase these debts now, so you don't have to go through the court process, because otherwise it's just a bad debt. You'll never get it back. So let's just go through some of the things that you can do now. If you have new customers coming on board, you know that the Christmas season's coming up in 4 weeks. You want to get paid before those 4 weeks. So if you have payment terms of 30 days in your terms, consider change it to 7 days, or consider change it to 14 days for any new files you're taking on right now, so that you can get paid before Christmas. A lot of the debtors who, it's very seasonal in terms of debtors. A lot of people want to pay their debts before the end of the financial year in June, because it's an expense on their accounts and they want to reduce their profit. After that, there's really no reason to pay your debts other than maintaining a good relationship with your supplier. And so it's very difficult to recover debts at this time of year because people are trying to save. There's no reason to have the expense. There's a lot of people that will drag on their payment terms. And just a couple pointers is that if you just put in every Friday that a reminder notice goes out, create an Excel spreadsheet. We create one for ourselves. We say green means action, yellow means hold, red means stop. You can create a bit of a spreadsheet to help recover those debts. And every Friday you review your Excel spreadsheet and put in your reminder notices. And every reminder notice should have a different title, slowly towards an escalation. So first of all, reminder notice, outstanding invoice. With the Christmas season just approaching, it would be great if you can make payment of your invoice. Thank you very much. If you've already paid, sorry for the reminder. The next one is, our office is closing in 3 weeks. We would like to get paid before Christmas. If you do not make immediate payment, we have no choice but to escalate this to a debt recovery agent. And then the other one is final notice, we're going to sue you, or final notice, we're going to report you to a credit reporting agency. But there has to be some kind of escalation, and never be afraid to pick up the phone. A lot of people will send reminder notices by email, but there's never anyone that has enough time to actually pick up the phone and have a chat. And 9 times out of 10, if you pick up the phone and have a chat about the outstanding invoices, you have a lot better success rate. And what the goal is from a debt recovery perspective, and from a court perspective, and from a legal perspective, we want to get the debtor to admit the debt. The minute they admit the debt, it opens up a lot of opportunities for you to collect the debt. I'm just having a look at this next slide. If they admit the debt, then it means it opens up the opportunity to create a payment plan. And you can create a payment plan by simply saying, thank you very much for admitting that you owe the money. We all know that you do owe the money. We want to get paid, but I understand you can't pay before Christmas. But we want to block something in, and we want to get some dates in terms of installment payments. So let's enter into a payment plan. Let's get that in writing, and let's get fixed dates on when you're going to actually make payment. What's really important about payment plans is that you can put a special clause into the payment plan that says, if the debtor doesn't make a particular installment payment, then the entire debt becomes due and payable automatically, and interest continues to accrue automatically, and debt recovery costs will be borne by them. So what it's all about doing is setting them up so that if they don't comply with the payment plan, then we actually have a method to recover legal costs or to issue what's called a statutory demand, which I'll get into later. So I've put a due date of the 13th of February, or 13th of December, basically as the last date to chase the debts this year. And the reason is that you have 3 weeks from now to try to escalate the matter. And you'll know in the next 3 weeks whether that debtor actually intends to pay you on this side of the holiday. And by the 13th of December, if you know that that's not going to happen, I guess I'm a little bit cynical as a litigation lawyer. So sometimes I just say, it'll be great to sue that client just before Christmas. It's a bit psychological, but if you get it to a lawyer by the 13th of December, then it means you can actually escalate it, and they are more likely to pay it if a lawyer sends a letter just before Christmas, because they're not going to want to have to deal with it over the holiday. They want to relax and enjoy their holiday. And so I feel it's important to escalate it. And lawyers need time. It's the busiest season for us. It's our silly season. And the legal shutdown industries generally from the 20th of December until the 12th of January. So it's very difficult to find a lawyer during those periods. And most courts are closed until the end of January. It's very similar to the construction industry. So use the next 3 weeks, try to get your debts, if you have any, paid. And if you can't by the last week, escalate it. And LawPath has over 1,000 lawyers that can draft a letter of demand for you very quickly, or they can help you draft up an application to NCAT, QCAT, VCAT, and you can do it yourself. You don't need to pay for a lawyer to do it for you. And I'll talk about that briefly in the next slide. So a lot of people will say, or a lot of my clients will BCC me in an email or CC me in an email, and they'll send an email to their debtor saying, if you don't pay tomorrow, then my lawyer is going to sue you. And I just randomly get emails from a lot of my clients, just randomly CC'd into things. And they just CC me to basically show that they're serious. But the reality is, when I pick up the phone, I said, are you really going to hire me to sue your client for $200? Because this is a little ridiculous. Because also the court process is 12 to 18 months. I always tell my clients, if you have a debt less than 10K, you should look at getting your terms fixed up so that you're taking some money in advance so you don't have a 10K debt. But if you do have a 10K debt, you're never going to get 10K out of court. The reason is that if you hire a lawyer, it's not worth your time. It's not worth your money, because lawyers will cost you 10K. If you run it in an NCAT, it's going to take you 1 to 2 days. NCAT, QCAT, VCAT. NCAT is the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal. VCAT is the Victorian, and QCAT is the Queensland. South Australia doesn't have it. Most states have a tribunal for individuals represent themselves. Otherwise, most local courts or magistrate courts allow for individuals to represent themselves for around any matter 10,000 or less. And it's not that they allow them to represent themselves. Everybody's allowed to represent themselves, but a lot of time there's no rule to evidence, which means you don't have to worry about the way you present your case on your own if it's a small claim. And it normally always goes to mediation first. So it's nothing really to be afraid of if you have a small claim and want to do it yourself. LawPath is here to help. We have a lot of people that can assist you with the procedural aspects of how to do it on your own, or you can just visit their websites. There's videos on VCAT's website that explains the whole process. There's step-by-step guides and so on. But one of the things I was saying is that if you have a debt of around $10,000 and you hire a lawyer, you're probably only going to get about 40% back. If you have a debt of $100,000 or less, you're still only probably going to get around 70% back. The reason is that you'll end up paying legal fees, and then you may not recover any of your legal fees, or if you recover some of your legal fees, you only recover half of your legal fees. So you're always going to be out of pocket no matter what. And so it's the best thing to do is negotiate and accept the money, even if it's less. I've had so many cases where my client says, I am not accepting a lesser amount. I said, okay, well, if you don't want to accept a lesser amount, you might not get anything at a later date. I had a case where I took over a case and my client owed $800,000. I came in to do a Supreme Court appeal, and when I lodged the Supreme Court appeal, I went to the other side and I said, we're going to offer you 300. If you don't take 300, you're going to get nothing. And they said, we're not taking it. And my client ended up declaring bankruptcy, and the companies were liquidated and they got nothing. So sometimes it's about taking what you can get now, because there's a risk that you might not get it ever again. So that's enough about debt recovery. It's not the brightest side of law, because you guys are all about growth and sustainability. So let's get into some other stuff. Some of you guys are working over the holidays. Some of you guys are in hospitality. Some of you guys are in construction. Depending on your industry, Depends on, this might be the busiest time of year, or you're shutting down. Most of this presentation is on the side of shutting down, but we'll talk briefly about also building up your company over this period as well. So there are a lot of people who are on retainers. So if you're a software developer, you have certain targets you have to meet. You might be doing it on a month-to-month basis. If you're in an industry where you're providing consulting services, you might have a service level agreement. What is important is that you know now that you need to look at these due dates. You got to make sure that you're completing the due dates. If you're not able to get the job done by the end of Christmas, you need to know and tell your client that there is going to be a shutdown, and you got to make sure everybody's on the same page, because disputes always happen primarily about lack of communication or a breakdown in communication. And what's important is you communicate. You should be putting out around now into your email signature that your office is going to be closed. So our office is going to start that tomorrow. So that every email, every person you're dealing with knows that the office is going to be closed for a certain period of time. What else is important is if you are signing off on new contracts, you put a special condition in saying this contract will be suspended potentially over this period, or you need to make arrangements for how you're going to be dealing with a service level or a consultancy during this period of closure. Yeah. Looking at right now is a really great time to take a couple days over the holidays and to have a real good look at your terms, have a real good look at your systems, and try to figure out how can I scale my business? What red tape do I currently have that I can remove, and how do I remove it? What processes do I need to make myself more successful next year? What is my cash flow looking like? What is my business plan looking like? Taking 2-3 days out of your holiday to focus on your business could result in a significant greater return for you if you actually put this time in now. One of those things is looking at your legals, obviously. You will be able to look back from January last year to today and determine whether you've had issues with cash flow. Have you had to inject money into your business yourself sometime this year? If so, why? Highly likely the reason why is because of your terms. Your terms and conditions might not be good enough, and they might be too weak to be able for you to chase your debts and maintain your cash flow. And a couple of those things to look at is debt collection costs. Putting a clause in saying, if you don't pay your bill, then there's debt collection costs. Another thing is looking at credit reporting agency. There's specific privacy rules about reporting your debtor to a debt collection agency. But if you tick those boxes, then you're able to do it. We've done a lot of contracts recently about sharing a data with Dun & Bradstreet and some of the other related parties in terms of the privacy principles and in terms of what information can be shared regarding debt and when can you report to a credit reporting agency. That's normally one of the scariest things for a debtor, is their credit being hindered as a result of non-payment. And if you have a clause and you've dealt with the privacy in your terms, then that's a very good line, very passive aggressive. You can just say, look, we just would love to get paid before Christmas. If not, just let you know, we might report you to a credit reporting agency. You can't do that if you don't have a proper term in your contract. And also I have a lot of clients that say, all right, we're going to go and we're going to chase this debt and we're going to claim interest too. And I said, okay, I'll spend 20 minutes calculating your interest. Oh, you are owed $16 because your interest is 12 or 2% per annum. I don't know why anyone would put 2% per annum as a interest. component into the debt, but it should be at least be 8 to 12%. It should be a bit of a something to cover your costs for not having that money. You are paying your wages, you are paying your rent, you are paying your software subscriptions, you are paying your motor vehicles and transport. Those are all costs that you're having to pay up front while waiting for money. There is a maximum amount of interest. I've had several cases regarding this. Most of those cases come into loans and lending. Rule of thumb is around 48%. That's short-term money lenders. They can go up to that much. But there is nothing in particular that limits the amount of interest. And we regularly see 2% per, or 0.02% per day, which is, I think it's 36% per annum, which is a not uncommon figure. You can do it by month, but you're better off doing per annum or per day. Monthly doesn't necessarily mean anything, because does it mean 30 days or 31 days? It's an ambiguous term. So it should be either 30 days each day or per annum. All right, so for those who are gearing up for the busy season, as opposed to the closing down season, most of those are in the hospitality industry. We just want to go over some things about hiring. So hospitality, retail industry, there might be engagement of temporary employees, and you got to look at new hires. Now, I'm not sure whether everybody knows what a modern award is. Does anybody know what or does anyone not know what a modern award is? It's actually can be very confusing. Just having a look. Basically, a modern award is the minimum standard of employment entitlements for your industry. If you have an administrator in your office, that's the clerical award. If you have, if you're in the construction industry, they have a construction one. If you're in the retail industry, they have a retail one. Hospitality, legal, so on. But there's also just general minimum standards, and those are set out in the National Minimum Wage Order, which specifies the actual minimum wage that an employee is allowed to, or that an employee must receive in Australia. And that's updated every year. Now, interestingly, a contractor has no protections. So there actually is no minimum wage for contractors. Now, looking at hiring people very quickly, if you hire a permanent full-time employee and you have less than 15 employees, an employer is always given the right of a 6-month probation period, essentially, to see whether that person is a good fit. An employer, even if you have a 3-month probation period in your contract, it doesn't matter, because an employee cannot bring an unfair dismissal claim against an employer if they've been terminated within 6 months and that employer has less than 15 employees. If the company has more than 15 employees, then that period is not 6 months, it's 12 months, meaning, sorry, it's the other way around. If you have less than 15 employees, you have 12 months. And if you have more than 15 employees, you have 6 months. But that's only in relation to unfair dismissals. There are different areas of law that a lot of people will find themselves falling into. There's something called adverse action. Adverse action is basically saying the employee has a workplace right, that employee has exercised that workplace right. As a result of exercising that workplace right, adverse action has taken place, and that opens up a section 340 and 341 of the Fair Work Act, which is general protections. So for instance, someone says, I've been bullied, and then you say, well, you're fired. that is a perfect example of a general protection. You have fired that person because now they're being difficult and they've exercised their right that they're being bullied. So even though you generally will have 6-month to 12-month period to see if the employee is the right fit, you still could be opened up to general protections that doesn't have that period of time requirement. But what this is more about is if you're hiring a temporary worker, don't put them on a permanent contract, because fair work and unfair dismissal applies to full-time, not casuals. So if you're going to hire someone on temporal, put them on a fixed term. And if you need them for longer, extend that fixed term. If they're hiring them for a project, put them on a project-based one, which is from the beginning of the project to the end of the project. If you're hiring them on casual, give them a casual agreement, which means that you can stop rostering them. If they're part-time, put them on part-time. LawPath has pretty much all of these templates in their system, and you can simply go in and grab those templates. But make sure you get the right kind of contract for the right kind of worker. And if you don't know which modern award, you can go to the website, the Fair Work Ombudsman website, and you can enter some of your details into the website, and they'll tell you which modern award applies. One modern award actually that a lot of people don't know exists is called the Professional Services Award, and that's anyone that has a science or engineering background. So a lot of people don't realize that software developers and so on, they actually do get caught up in the Professional Services Award, and most people don't know that. So let's look at your structure. When my clients come to me, they say, all right, we got a brand new company, we're going to make $8 million in the next 2 years. I say, okay, that's fantastic. I don't really care about your sales and marketing campaign at the moment, but let's just talk about your corporate structure. They say, okay, we're going to create a family trust for me, a family trust for my business partner. We're going to create a corporate trustee for me and a corporate trustee for my business partner. Our two corporate trustees are going to hold the 50% ownership in our holding company. Our holding company is then going to have 100% shareholding in our IP holding company. Our IP holding company is then going to license the technology to our holding company, and then we're going to create a subsidiary where the subsidiary is wholly owned by the holding company, and then we're going to do a license agreement there. And I said, that's fantastic. How many companies are you incorporating? All right, well, let's talk about how much it's going to cost from an accounting perspective on a yearly basis. How many zero accounts do you need? Okay, let's also talk about how much your filing fee is going to be for establishing your companies. And let's talk about how much your accountants are going to charge you on an annual basis. And considering you have no sales at all, maybe it's a good idea just to create a company and you hold your shares. And let's just keep it simple. And if you have a proven concept after maybe 6-12 months, let's then restructure. Because at the moment, you probably don't need to create a structure that's so sophisticated, because the ongoing costs can be expensive. So right now, if you have created a very simple structure, which is just, you own the shares directly and you have a standard PTY Ltd business, it might now be time to look at your structure. There can be a lot of tax benefits from transferring your shares from you personally into a family trust. The benefit is that if your family trust owns the shares in the business, then what happens is that the dividends are distributed to the shareholder. The shareholder that is the family trust, who can then distribute to all the beneficiaries in your family trust. And maybe you have a spouse who's not working, who's staying at home with the children. Well, then in that case, that spouse can receive some of the distribution. And if it's under 20 grand, then there's no tax on that amount. And you can then receive the other distribution. There's different ways to benefit from a family trust. But what is important is that if you are going to restructure, if you hold the shares right now yourself, and then you create a family trust, that's a transfer of your share. And with the transfer of your share, there is potential stamp duty implications. That is, if you've ever applied for an R&D grant, or if you have a large turnover, then you could transfer, you might have issued shares for 1 cent or $1 to yourself. and then you go and transfer that same share for $1 to your family trust. The issue is that that share is no longer worth $1 because maybe now you're making 400,000 a year, or maybe now you've just taken in a $50,000 R&D grant, and so therefore there's going to be a capital gains tax issue. So I normally tell people, once your business starts making about $100,000 a year, it's a good idea to have a look at your structure, and it might be worthwhile to create a family trust if you have beneficiaries that you can distribute to. Also, if you're in a high-risk industry, if you are doing the gig economy stuff, there can be real issues potentially in terms of liability, and it might be worthwhile to sell your IP over to an IP holding company, and that IP holding company then licensing the technology back to your trading company. We do these internal license agreements all the time. What happens is that you have all your technology held in one entity, it licenses it to another entity, and you have a default clause in it. And that default clause essentially says, well, if the company that's using the technology enters into default, the IP company can automatically claw back not only technology that was licensed to it, but anything that's been developed upon it, any information that has been used within it, any database that's been created using that technology, and you can claw it all back. So for instance, if your trading company gets sued for something, your parent company can terminate the license, claw back all the technology, and start again under a new entity with a new company with an S on the end of your name. And it sounds crazy, but it's true. You can do that. Unless you're a construction industry. If you're in the construction industry, then maybe talk to me, because there's anti-phoenixing laws in place, and you could lose your building license. So let's not talk about the construction industry at the moment. Tom's going to get in a little bit about the next slide.
I was just going to say, yeah, well, I mean, I think the majority of the people on the call are companies, if that's correct, having a look at the polls that we have coming through. But Damin, I thought it'd be good to just quickly, for those of us who are still in sole trader partnership structures, just reaffirming the benefits of having a company quickly for them.
So a lot of people, again, a company can be it can be more expensive operating a company than a sole trader. A sole trader, you file a normal tax return. You don't have to do anything other than that. It's quite simple, just like any other individual tax return. Once you create a company, the company has to have a separate tax return. And you have to pay for an accountant normally to do it. And you have to have a profit and loss statement, and you got to normally register for tax and so on. So let's just, I'll get into this very briefly. So the first thing is corporate veil. There's a bunch of cases, but there's a case called Solomon v. Solomon that came out many, many years ago, in I think 1800s. And Solomon v. Solomon essentially says that a company is its own separate entity. It acts in its own capacity. It is separate from the individuals. And so if someone wants to sue the company, it can't get access to the individuals that run it because it acts in its own capacity. So when you have a company, you have shareholders of the company. And those shareholders, some of you might not realize this, but if your name's John and John is the shareholder of this new business, John is also the director. The reason John is a director of that company is actually because John, the shareholder, has appointed John, the director, to that company, because the shareholders ultimately have the control of the business, and they nominate who's going to be the shareholder or who's going to be the directors of the business. And so when you are trading as a company, the company might not pay an invoice. You can't go after John for the invoice that the company holds. There's only 3 ways really to pierce what's called the corporate veil. And that is in a case called Stone Knight, and just trying to recall off the cuff. Can't remember exactly. But in essence, it is situations of a clear scam, sham. They use it because it was an English case, and fraud. Um, and that's essentially is where you're going to be able to pierce the corporate veil. Now, on that point, directors can be personally liable for insolvent trading. So if you cannot pay your debts as they come due, Section 588 Corporations Act, you can go after a director personally. Misleading and deceptive conduct, Section 18 of the Australian Consumer Laws, you can go after a director personally for misleading and deceiving a customer. And sometimes on employment matters, Section 550 deals with aiding and abetting. But generally speaking, it's only going to be misleading, deceptive, insolvent trading, breach of director duties, aiding and abetting certain things. From a tax perspective, there's a lot of benefits. Entering into contracts, again, you're entering into it as a separate entity. It has nothing to do with you individually. If you're in a high-risk industry, you must get a company. I actually don't know why anyone even creates partnerships anymore. They're a bit tedious, and a company is just really simple and easy. And if you have a company with more than one shareholder, you must have a shareholders agreement. Shareholders agreement is the only thing that says if there's a dispute between you two, then you're forced to sit down at a table and try to discuss it and try to mediate it before you go to court. If you cannot get a resolution between shareholders, you have to wind up your company. That's it. There's nothing else that can be done. So shareholders agreement, imperative in company structures, high risk business, you must have a company. There was another thing there about taking an investment. You need a company to take an investment because you need to issue shares. Trust. Yeah, just very quickly, trust structures gives you the tax benefits. It gives you the ability to distribute dividends between several different people within your family. And there's something called franking credit. So if the company pays 30% tax on some profits, and then they distribute that into the family trust, you now have 30% of that distribution already taxed. So if your income tax is 37% or 47%, then when you distribute the money from your trust to you, you're only paying 7% tax on it or 17% tax on it because the company has already paid 30% on your behalf. Now, LawPath has introduced something new, and I'm getting my own companies transferred over to LawPath, and that's the virtual office. I don't know how many people get a reminder notice to pay your annual ASIC fee for $287 a year, I think. And probably if there was some statistics out there, I think ATO ASIC makes a lot of money on late penalty notices. So what happens is that you get a notice from ASIC, it says pay your $287, and then if you don't, I think the penalty is around $60, and if you don't again, it's another 60, 70. It's not uncommon to get up to 544, and I know that figure because I've seen them quite a bit in my own email. So LawPath has created basically a virtual office, a registered office. And the registered office essentially is so that your reminder notices automatically come to them, and then they can remind you, put things in your calendar, chase you. LawPath's really good at sales, so they'll get their sales team on that phone, and they'll start calling you and telling you to pay your annual renewal fee. But what's actually important is, depending on your industry, is making sure your registered office is covered over the holiday. There is something called Security of Payments Act in the construction industry, and that is where someone issues an invoice and you don't respond in 10 days, they can go get automatic judgment against you. And when they issue it on your registered office. That's the address that you've put down when you incorporated your company with ASIC. And there's another thing called a statutory demand, and lawyers love statutory demands. We can chase debts real fast that way. And essentially what that is that when someone makes an admission of liability, i.e. via a payment plan and acknowledgement of debt document,
And if they do not comply with it, a lawyer can issue a statutory demand. And that essentially says there is a non-genuine dispute, or there's a no genuine dispute in relation to this debt. The debt is owing, it has been omitted, and therefore you have 21 days to pay us. And if you do not pay, we will apply to the Supreme Court and we'll wind up your company. We'll appoint a friendly liquidator who's a friend of our lawyers, and that guy will now go into your office and confiscate all your computers, and we'll then sell your business for whatever to you. You can buy their business for very cheap, potentially. It is a very, very powerful tool. And if that client doesn't pay within 21 days, then they automatically commit an act of insolvency. That means that if they have any loans, they're now under substantial default under their loans. If they have any lease agreements, they're in substantial default. If their landlord finds out that they have just committed an act of insolvency, then they could lose their rental premises. They could be closed into by the bank. So it is a very handy tool to collect debts super fast. And right now we have about 30 days. So if anyone has some quick debts they need to chase, we can issue those off and try to get you paid by around the 15th of December. That's essentially what it looks like. It's pretty scary. And that's actually the court form. So has a big box at the bottom. A failure to respond to the statutory demand can have serious consequences. In particular, it can result in the company being placed in liquidation and control of the company passing to a liquidator. Now, the only way to stop that is to file an application in the Supreme Court or the federal court. And the filing fee to actually stop it is around $2,800 to $3,300, which means that if you have a debt of more than $4,000, the only way for them to stop this is to pay $3,000 in filing fees and probably another $2,000 for a lawyer. So it's really good for those debts that are around $6,000 to $10,000, because from a practical perspective, they're more likely to pay you than not, because it's going to cost more to defend it. So from a business perspective, at the end of the year, you have a bunch of little tasks that you got to do. If you're not registered for GST, you should consider whether you need to register for GST. I think the threshold is 75 grand. Which is if you have a turnover more than 75 grand per annum, you must be registered for GST. And then from there, you have business activity statements. I have a lot of clients that have traded for maybe 3 years and have never done a business activity statement. They eventually get a notice from the ATO saying, you owe us $350,000 because you've never paid tax and you've been collecting GST and you've never paid it back to us. That's our money. Basically, if you don't know, a business activity statement is saying when you issue an invoice for $1,000, you have $100 on it, which is GST. When you receive an invoice from somebody, there's also a GST component. Your business activity statement looks at what you received and what you've paid out, and the differences you then have to send off to the ATO. So you got to have to do that by the end of the year. You have to pay your superannuation contributions. Interestingly, on the 1st of July this year, the ATO has finally got what they wished for, which is if a director does not pay tax for the company, they're personally liable, as just started this year. A director is also personally liable for superfund payments, superannuation contributions. And so it's important, and it's very important that you pay it and you do it on time. There's big penalties if you don't. And then it's looking at what have you done this year? Have you issued shares to anyone? Have you transferred shares to anyone? Have you signed any loan agreements? Going back through all your legals and making sure that you have everything, all the ticks and boxes, all the boxes ticked. And try to figure out whether you're missing anything. Do you need a board resolution for this? Do you need a share transfer form for that? And if you go into LawPath platform, they have everything. They have the share certificate. They have the transfer notice. They have the board resolution. You can get pretty much all your corporate secretarial needs in the platform. And And then it's looking at other things like insurance. A lot of companies don't know that by law you must have work cover or work safe in some states insurance policy. That is essentially that if your employee is, and that's only if you have employees, it's if your employee is driving to work or taking public transport and gets in an injury, then work cover or work safe will pay for it. If someone's injured at work, they will pay for it. I believe it's a criminal offense to not have it, and it's not very expensive. It's about $500 a year. But if you have an employee, you must have your work cover, work safe policy in place. Victoria has recently introduced new criminal prosecution relating to workplaces. So if someone is injured at work, the manager, the OH&S manager or the director of the company can be criminally prosecuted. And I believe it includes jail. And I had a case about 5 years ago where someone in New South Wales was criminally prosecuted because New South Wales has had it for many years. So if you are in an environment that has some safety issues, like people are traveling, even if you have salespeople, you should consider safe work methods and induction programs, because the first thing they look at when they prosecute is what do you have in place, what policies, what induction, what training, and you should consider whether you need those based on your industry. Public liability insurance, that's slip and fall insurance. If someone comes to your office and in your lobby, they fall. Professional indemnity is if you are providing software engineering services and you stuff it up, and as a result, there's consequential loss, you can call upon your professional indemnity insurance provider. Can the ATO get at the family trust of a director in relation to tax owed on the company to recover debt? Good question. Trevor McCarthy, I know this guy. But what it is I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But what is an interesting case is I had a case recently where somebody appointed a friend to be a director of their business because they couldn't be a director of the business. The company then owed tax, and therefore the friend who was the director became personally liable for the company tax. And when the friend, the director, went and filed her own personal tax returns, she was supposed to get some money back, but the ATO garnished it and didn't give her any money back and applied it direct to the company. So there is definitely powers in place by the ATO to take any monies that they can get their hand on and apply it to any debts that are related. My business partner would probably know this answer, but I don't.
Yeah, we can chase it up post the webinar as well.
Now, another thing is looking at your technology. And Tom can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a great time over Christmas if you are taking a little bit of time off. And maybe it'd be great to hear from the people on the webinar who is taking a little bit of time off over Christmas as well, taking a little bit of time to refresh, maybe do a little bit of strategizing and come back better than ever for the new year. Yes, a few of us. Great, it's good to hear. So I think an important thing to consider as part of this time is thinking about the software and the applications that you use. Generally, as the year goes on, we know as business owners, there's different pieces of software that we try out, and for whatever reason, it might be something that we don't believe is going to be essential for us moving forward. So it's always good to take a little bit of a look at your bank statements over that period of time and check that out to see if there are any of those that you want to discontinue. It'd be good to, importantly, if you're selling products, to take a look at doing a bit of a stock take during this time as well. Is there anything you can do around any kind of malfunctioning equipment technology that you use? It's generally going to be a good time when we get to a point at the end of the year where when things slow down a little bit, we can take a bit of time to step back and say, well, because everything doesn't have to be kind of working through and we're not going through the cogs in the same type of motion, can I take a little bit of time to invest in some new technology, invest in some new equipment, and potentially, as we mentioned before, investing in some new hires and employees as well. So I hope some of us take a little bit of time off over Christmas to try that out and make sure that we come back nice and fresh. So I think that leads us to the end of the presentation, and I wanted to thank Damin for his time. We do have a little bit of time. I know it is 1 o'clock now, but we did start a little bit late. So if you do have questions, we do have at the bottom of the webinar, there's a little tab there that says questions, and it gives you the opportunity to ask a question through there. So if you want to post something now, put that through, and Damin will see if we can answer that right then on the call. If it's something that's a little bit more complex and specific, we'll see how we can assist you following up from here as well. So we've had a few that have come through. Yes, we will be sharing the slides as well, so that's not going to be an issue. Question from Ivan, Damin, maybe you can answer this one quickly. For business with less than 15 employees, do the company directors count as employees if they are working in the business getting a salary? I think this was related.
Yes, they do. Yep.
Okay, nice and easy one there.
Yep.
It looks like there are a few more detailed questions that have come through as well. For those, we might need to take a little bit of time offline to get answering of those and to sort those ones out. We will be sending around a little bit of resources and information post this as well. Just having a look at a few of the other questions coming through. Now's your opportunity to ask those questions if they are fresh in your minds. Okay, so to finish off today, I just want to hear who of us is looking to potentially invest in legal services into the new year. Looks like Alex has actually already taken that up as well and taken up the offer that we're about to talk about. But I did want to bring something up. We do want to talk about a special exclusive offer that we have for people on the call. And so we have today an exclusive for people who are attending through in here right now, the access to LawPath's Essential Plan. And so for a new user, somebody who hasn't tried out LawPath before, there's an opportunity for you now to take this up and give this a go. So we're offering this plan for those of us who are here on the call for only $199. That's billed annually as part of this promotion. You can access this straight away if you have a look in the offers section of your account of the webinar right now. There's the ability to click through straight into that, or you can put in the URL lawpath.com.au/webinar. I would really recommend for those of us on the call who maybe it's been a while since we have used LawPath as well. It's been quite a while for some of us, so we might want to take a little bit of a refresh at how the platform is now looking. We've done a great deal of updating over the last month. So if you take a look at what we've got here, can anybody see my screen that I'm sharing here? Can you see the new dashboard that I've got here? Yes? Looks like a few of us can't. Okay, that's all right. This is the joy of doing things live and running with technical issues. I'll try it one more time and we'll give it a go. Thank you, Max. We're very happy with how the dashboard's looking as well. Great to hear a nice bit of feedback there. So can everybody see my screen now? That's come through? Fantastic. So this is the new LawPath dashboard. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of how things work through in here, where you can look to connect with lawyers on our network, such as Damin, who's been very kind to offer his assistance throughout this call. But having a look at some of the things that you may need to do as an example, Damin talked a lot about debts and actually looking to recover those debts. And, generally a course of action that Damin referred to is completing a letter of demand. And so we make it very easy through our software to be able to get the solution that you need for that. And so if you just go directly in, you can create a legal document. I can search in here for a letter of demand. We've got a range of different variations of this document as well. I can go to create this straight away. When I hit on create, I've got access to the document, and through here, we ask you a bunch of questions that allow you to then customize the document for your needs. Any of the information that you're putting through, we provide examples as well, then gets added in to the document. You can complete through of these. Most of the documents on the platform, due to the ease of use that we've created them around, they take between 5 and 10 minutes. Very easy for you to go and complete. But a new feature that we've got that I wanted to show now is when you've completed a document, like I've done over here, you now have the ability to sign that document directly from within your account as well. So I can click directly on an e-signature. I can type my name through in here. If I'm John Smith and I've got access to a signature that's already been drawn up for me, I can also go through and draw this one up for myself, insert that directly into the contract, ready to send, download, sign off to whoever we need to send that forward to. So outside of that, you've got the ability through your account to connect up with lawyers from all over our network, including Damin. It's free to actually go through, submit those quotes in. We've got the ability through here to create any kind of quote for any matter that we need. Damon's just brought up a good point for me as well. Back on the documents, there is the ability to upload our own documents as well. So instead of investing in a separate e-signature platform, you've got the ability to sign all of these within your LawPath account. So you'll have access to our marketplace as well. We do now have legal advice plans, which Damin assists us with in the way of being able to provide on-demand legal advice, because I know for a lot of us on the call, one of the big issues that we have is the time to actually access a lawyer. We go through, we try to find a lawyer. There's always waiting times in those periods as well, and cost is always going to be a great barrier as well. So that is an additional plan that we can look to discuss with you as well. But for today, what we are looking to offer is access to that essentials plan, our annuals essentials plan, for that one low cost of just $199. So if you've got some time to actually take that one on, I highly recommend having a look, giving it a go. If you have any questions, you can speak to our support team. They're more than happy to be able to assist with any need that you have in relation to this. Ask any further questions. I did want to note as well, before we finish up, that we do have a range of fixed fee legal services that Damin and his team are happy to provide in relation to some of the different topics that we have brought up as well. Damin, was there anything you wanted to add to that as well? Any of those areas? I think we were having a look at a few things related to debt.
Yes, I'll just pull something up here. Can't find it.
That's okay.
Essentially, we are offering fixed fees for payment plans, fixed fees for letter of demands, simple ones. Can you find that?
Yes. Give me a moment. Damin has sent through all of those. I've got it here. So we are also talking about standard payment plans, acknowledgement of debt.
Yes, standard payment plans, acknowledgement of debt, $350 plus GST. Standard letter of demand for payment, $250 plus GST. And then we have LawPath's virtual office that is a new feature, which is on sale at the moment as well.
So if you are interested in any of these additional offers as well, if you come through to the webinar page, or even if you just go through from our homepage and speak to our live chat operators, they'll be more than happy to assist in pointing you in the direction of those additional offers as well. So any of the additional questions that do come through, we'll look to answer them post this as well. We'll also provide for all of you for attending, you will have access to the replay of this webinar, access to all of the slides, and we'll provide some additional resources to make sure that you're having the best time you can over the Christmas break. So that's it from us. As we said, we'd love for you to take up this special offer. It's exclusive for those of you on the webinar, and it will expire in the next 7 days. So this is the time to take it up. If you're just wanting for the next 12 months to not have to worry about any legal headaches, anything that's going to pop up at different periods, we've got you covered. So have a look at the plan, head to lawpath.com.au/webinar, or you can click on the offer button right now to take that one up. Other than that, I want to thank Damin for being on.
Thank you
Damin,
for inviting me, Tom.
It's been fun. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and we look to hear from you soon. Have a fantastic Christmas and New Year's.